Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Professionalism and Trust Committee of the Police Authority Board. This meeting is being live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given consent to their inclusion. The recording of the meeting will remain online for up to one civic year. Chair.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for all making time to attend. It's great to see a great turnout. I think we're struggling for chairs, which is a nice change. Town Clerk.
Thank you. The first item is apologies. We received apologies for absence from Melissa Collett, Alderman Emmett Eden, and Jason Gross.
Thank you very much. Town Clerk.
Item number 2 is members' declarations. I'm not aware of any declarations.
Yep.
Item number 3 is to agree the public minutes and non-public summary of the meeting held on the 3rd of June.
Any questions on the minutes? Sanjay.
Thank you. I'll provide some corrections to the spelling of the surnames outside of this meeting.
Thank you very much.
If members consent to authorise the town clerk to amend those and publish online.
Can we, yes, amend those minutes? Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4 is the references from for the committee, the outstanding references.
Any questions on that? Any points? I know some of those we're going to be covering off inside of the report itself. Yeah, Sanjay.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say we can provide a verbal update to those outstanding references if the Chair would like, or we can.
Please do that. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of the first action around the one-page dashboard, members will note from the first agenda item there is Appendix C. And whilst not a one-page dashboard, this is the evolving efforts around providing that one place picture of performance across the department, and would welcome any comments from members when we get to that point. In terms of the second agenda items, in terms of the stop and search in regards to the University of East London, we have Superintendent Wynne here who will provide that update when you get to your agenda item later on in the agenda. Thank you. The agenda item on the glossary of terms, apologies, that is complete. It was circulated late, so hopefully that has been received, and if not, we can make sure that that gets circulated after. The other action on the bottom in terms of the deep dive into national averages, if I could pass across to Carly just to provide a verbal update on that one.
Is that one right? So what we have obtained is the force data, which splits out those averages, and we've looked at the IPC data. It doesn't give that granular level of data, so we need to go out and benchmark some other forces. So we've got half of the data. It's not a complete picture, yes, I'm afraid, Chair, but what I suggest is we can give that in a written update for the next paper as soon as we receive that benchmarking data. That will provide that split in terms of non-criminal and criminal cases. It is next to an action fraud subject, but I think it was a broader conversation around complaints data, not necessarily action fraud, because that's now reported at ECCC.
Okay. Is there any way that can be provided prior to the next meeting?
Yes, as long as I can get the information. I don't recall what the date is for the next meeting, but as soon as I've got it, I'll forward it on without waiting for next papers.
Okay. Just a point to note, without sounding churlish, there's a bit of a trend in terms of slippage on a number of things, and maybe we need to have a fuller conversation, maybe outside of here, Richard, just in terms of we are slipping on a number of things for different reasons, of course, and the chair of Police Authority Board would like to make a comment on that, please.
No, on just item 8, which is the action fraud. So you say that it's moved now to the economic security and cybercrime. So can we make sure that it then comes on that agenda? Because sometimes it's just misses. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, but just more generally around slippage. So can we take an action for us to organise a conversation outside of here regarding that? Because I think that sort of, it's a thread that runs through the whole paper. And I think we just need to be on the ball a little bit more. Okay. Well, item 9.
Thank you, Chair. And again, Superintendent Wynne will cover that as part of the update on stop and search agenda item.
Okay. Okay, Town Clerk.
Item 5 is the equity, diversity and inclusivity update.
Okay. Is that yours, Kate?
Yes, Chair. Yes, apologies. So hopefully members will have now had the opportunity to read through the report. There are 2 fairly significant differences to what we've produced in what we've produced this time. So taking on feedback from members and chair as before. So we've got a real change to the evaluation template where we've moved away from just capturing feedback which is reactionary to try and provide something more meaningful, which we'll come on to shortly. And secondly, we've also been able to include some measurements for the first time. So again, I'm sure members will recall at the last PSIC meeting, and I say PSIC because it was PSIC then, we agreed that we'd start reporting some of the metrics as detailed and previously signed off within the strategy. So albeit we haven't placed targets on these, we're closely monitoring them. So just to pick out some of the sort of key highlights then from this report, in relation to the EDI strategy generally, all actions are now well in progress. Significant pieces of work have been completed in this quarter, which include the publication of our public sector equality duty as part of our statutory obligations, a review of our staff networks and the delivery of EDI training to our senior leadership team, which took place in the summer. And was delivered in conjunction with Exeter University. We have had to reprofile our forecast very slightly as part of business planning and perhaps make a more realistic forecast. It doesn't impact too much on the end kind of profile. It's just due to additional demand, which again couldn't be predicted, including the Supreme Court ruling and a move in ownership of some of the wellbeing portfolio over to this team. And also, in addition, much of the team's attention, certainly since the end of September, since the end of summer into September, October, has been the delivery of the MBPA conference, so the National Black Police Association conference, which we hosted here. Again, very successful feedback so far certainly suggests this is the case. We've now had a debrief which has taken place. We're gathering feedback on that and continuing to link in with the events company and the host force for next year. Also thinking about the legacy piece for both the corporation and City of London, which is really, really important. And also how we give real consideration to how we translate the police accountability and justice for all in what we do. So not only going forward in the work we do, the police race action plan, but also ensuring it forms a really key part of our response in future EDI inspections. The other key success for the team is the ongoing delivery of our inclusivity programme, and I include that because it's a really significant piece of work. We've delivered another 10 sessions since the last reporting period and again reached over 200 people. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've really progressed our work on evaluation. We've designed a new form, which hopefully members will see and will like, making better use of Microsoft Teams and technology to try and support what we're doing within a small team. And this time including both level 1 and level 2 feedback. So as just mentioned, not just reacting to how it was, but actually looking at knowledge gain, which we've been able to include for the first time. We know we need to move that on towards behavioural change as well, so how are officers and staff changing their behaviour as a result, and then finally finishing on the kind of what's the impact of all of that work. Really, really important. So we're still at a fairly basic stage with our evaluation strategy, but it is progressing and it is moving in the right direction, and we're confident that we'll be able to progress this between now and the next financial year even further. Linked to the inclusivity programme, but perhaps in less positive news, we've been able to take time to take a more robust look at our compliance data, which is included within the pack.
So members will know that the inclusivity programme is mandatory for all of our officers and staff, regardless of rank or role, and people have to complete a module every 6 months. There's a number to choose from. However, our analysis has uncovered a few trends, hence we included these as part of our problem statement pack, which we delivered to our EDI strategic board, recognising that compliance isn't where it should be and that we need to make improvements. However, we've done a lot since that time. We're going to be reporting on those figures again next month at our own internal governance, and we're really confident those have increased. We've worked with some of the specific teams who haven't been attending those to work out why they're not attending, to see how we can make sure that they do go along to those, but also some of the issues around the processes and how attendance is recording. No, we've got some issues with our systems, and a lot of this is a kind of manual trawl as well. So like I said, reporting on those in November. A few more of the key points I'll just run through on analysis more generally, as I know it's something that comes up a lot when we talk about this particular team. We do now have a dedicated business analyst working within professionalism and trust over the next 6 months to really help us better understand our demand and capacity. What regularly comes up at these meetings is how difficult it is to quantify the work that we're doing. So it's early days at the moment, but we've already found some improvements we can make to ensure that we're being as efficient as we can be as a small team. I'll just talk briefly about listening circles. It's quite topical at the moment, and we have put on a number of those in force again since the last briefing. So we've had recent circles on the Supreme Court ruling and a special listening circle for those on long-term leave, whether that be paternity or maternity, along with some of the ongoing tensions around immigration. However, since writing this document, we've had to respond further as a force following the Panorama documentary, which I'm sure many of you will have seen. And one of our quick time kind of responses for that is a listening circle, which we have planned later this month, well, next week, 20th of October. I've included an update in the report on the training for senior leaders, which I've mentioned already in the summer. What's really important again is that isn't just a tick box exercise. So we don't just say, well, our senior leaders have had this training. We're actually working with inclusive employers on quantifying that kind of return on investment and making sure that's a long-term piece. I've included an update on our youth ISAG, who are fantastic and have attended a number of events recently, including national public order training and cyber security workshops. And again, including those going forward as we look at our response to Panorama, we're really keen to capture their views too. Finally, then, in terms of risks and challenges, and apologies, the report's quite long this time, so I've just tried to pick out the key bits, but around risks and challenges, in particular, and we know in this area of work that events and incidents can come to us on an ad hoc basis, and we've had and left field and disrupt plans. So in the paper, I talk about the Supreme Court ruling. We've had various protests around immigration, and as we said more recently, the Panorama documentary events in Manchester and so on. So that remains an ongoing challenge to us because we do have to respond to those, but they're unexpected and unpredictable. One thing that we can predict, we know we have to do, is a lot of work on our police race action plan maturity matrix. So this is a significant piece of work. We invited the national lead, so Assistant Chief Constable Sarah Johnson came to our force to talk through what this is going to entail. Again, we got really positive feedback on all we're doing in the City of London Police, not least the fact that we hosted the conference, but a lot of our initiatives were picked up on as really great practice. But this is going to be a significant piece of work and something that we expect future inspections to use as a benchmark, not for just how we're doing against the race action plan, but on EDI more generally. So we will need to invest in that. And the final thing, which I'll just talk about in terms of risk and challenges, is the outstanding EIAs. And when I say outstanding, I mean policies which have been published with EIAs missing, not ones that are really good. So in total, I think we have around 100. I know that's now reduced, but we do still need to do quite a lot of work on that, not just on completing the ones that are missing, but in making sure that message is clear in our force that whenever we do a new piece of work or project, we need to be looking at a quality impact assessment as well. And that's it. Finally, the Appendix C is around measuring our impact. So this is our first attempt. I'll mention it now because I know it's not It isn't perfect, but likewise, we all know that you wanted to see something. So this will certainly improve and evolve. This is just our setting out of what this could look like and some of the information and data that we do have. We've been explicit in stating that measurement, albeit we know it's a priority for us at the moment, we're focusing on that evaluation. Measurement will come much more into the fold from next year, and we'll be doing something more extensively. So it is really a work in progress. Those are the key highlights. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. I know Tice, Chair, would like a first question, but what I'd like to do first and foremost, I guess, is again commend you for all the hard work that's been happening. It's consistently, there's a lot of hard work going into this particular agenda, but there is points of scrutiny that we need to take. And I think the second piece for me is, of course, I commend you on the hard work and the effort put into the conference, the NPB hours, and I always get it. I hate acronyms. Anyway, really good work. I was there myself. I saw it. I saw the level of engagement. I saw the level of challenge, which I also found quite a useful thing to listen to and see, and also to talk to a number of delegates who were talking separately, who were very impressed with the quality of the event, the quality of the location, and also the really sort of frank and open conversations that were had, and some of the speakers that came up and said, so well done, a round of applause. And would be really interesting to hear from the staff, however you do that qualitatively, to say what did they think, what were some of the highlights for them on a thematic basis, you know, whether that's a separate conversation we have outside of here, just to get a sense of, you put a lot of hard work and effort into that. It really interested the key stakeholders and people on the front line, what they thought of the event, and in terms of quality and everything along those lines. Okay, but thank you so much. Okay, first lot of questions. I know, Tice, you had a point to make. I've got a number of questions on here as well. Answer, so Steph.
Thank you, Chair. And just to echo, really well done on organising and hosting the National Black Police Association conference, and thanks to everyone at City Police and indeed Corporation for that hard work. I think your point around if there are some takeaways or things or themes or, you know, lessons learned from those conversations, and I've heard, sadly I couldn't be there because I was off sick with COVID, but thank you for stepping in also to do my keynote speech, and thanks to Deputy Jason Groves for attending as well. But I think that's kind of, you know, are some themes, feedback, lessons that we can take away that would be good. A few points. First of all, I like the kind of description around listening circles. I think that's very good. I think also that you're planning one after Charing Cross is really important, although it's happened with the Metropolitan Police Service. Of course, it is really important for us to reflect on that, and we're not immune to any of those things that are happening across the boundaries. and also thank you for the openness and digging in a little bit more around the inclusivity program and the compliance, or the non-compliance, we sadly have to say. And I do so commend you on doing that, but some worrying themes coming out, like frontline roles who are less engaging, like men who are less engaging and junior officers who are less engaging. All of them are actually the ones that should be engaging more. So that is concerning. And I know that you've set yourself, I think, a target by 80% by Q1 next year, compliance. That is good. So we need to keep track on that. But let me put it this, it's mandatory. Mandatory is mandatory. So I can see why you're looking at kind of, are we recording it, and you know, can we do things to make it more, you know, but there is a choice. There's not one item that they need to do. So it's, you know, at some point, what does not doing this mean? Unless you have a good excuse, you're off sick or whatever, I can get it. But there needs to be a consequence. And for me, for example, at some point, if you haven't done this, then you can't progress. Simple. Mandatory is mandatory. No excuses unless there's a real excuse. And then just a warn, kind of be careful watching back online. How on earth are you going to manage that they monitor that they're actually watching it back online and not just switching it on? So that's probably for now, Chair, if that's okay.
Jackie.
So following on, it's pretty much what I was, but I had a couple of questions just around the detail on that. But firstly, to say, brilliant to see that knowledge shift and behavioural change is being evaluated, because I think that's going to give us some really rich data and insight in terms of the training. I thought the feedback on the training was exceptional. So I suppose my questions are, you know, just in terms of the frontline roles, what do we think are the barriers? I mean, I understand the sort of mandatory, but what are the barriers to frontline officers actually attending that training? And why hire with staff rank as opposed to officer as well? Is that an operational issue? And I think that was it. Oh, well, I suppose the other thing, and I think I have probably raised it before some time ago when we were just talking about that sort of culture of an organisation in terms of embedding training and thinking about how that was supporting people to progress in their roles, but also whether or not there's any correlation with job satisfaction and people that take up training as well. Is there any link between the HR policies that sort of feedback people's satisfaction at work and how much training they're actually doing on the job? Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to answer those, I've got a number of points myself, but I'd like to ask you to just respond to those questions first. Thank you.
I'll try my best, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, the comments around the inclusivity programme, and like I said, it's been great that we've actually been able to really dive into this data, because we thought we were around 40–50%. Our systems aren't great, so the fact that we've been able to spend a bit more time and it's lower, absolutely a bit more worrying. However, there is a caveat around that in terms of the process for capturing. I think a lot of officers and staff haven't been recording it officially, or they've recorded it on their own records, but haven't shared that with our training schools. So there's an element of messaging and process that we're working on improving. Absolutely. So all of the department heads, because we raised this at our strategic board, all of our department heads were given the task of writing their own individual plan for their own teams to say how they were going to absolutely ensure it's mandatory where possible, and then obviously notify us if people are off sick or unable to do for whatever reason. So we've got that in place. And again, around the consequence, have made it very clear in future, this forms part of your PDI or performance development review, where your training needs to be up to date for promotion. So that message has already gone out. Yeah, in terms of the actual barriers, it's been really interesting doing some focus groups with those teams, and there are pockets of teams which haven't had great compliance. Certainly with shift work, you know, putting sessions on at times, you're only going to capture some, and it is that operational deployability which is going to be priority over completing this programme, but it is really important. So my chief inspector has done some work putting on specific sessions to fit in with their own training times, and that seems to be working well. And again, it turns out a lot of them had attended some of these events, but because the communication hasn't been there, they haven't even been aware that that's what been formed part of the programme. So lots of work underway. The question that I don't know the answer to is around the satisfaction at work and CPD training. I think that's something definitely worth exploring. Obviously part of our staff survey as we're looking into planning that now. So it's perhaps a really good time to take that away and think about how we can cross-reference that in some way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Points I have, and I'm not sure if the Deputy Chair's got some points as well, but it's almost rain on your parade. It's been a year since we produced, over a year since we produced the EDI report, the strategy. Yeah, we are still waiting for an impact framework. Now, I know we are making strides in that direction, but we're still not there. And my challenge is, we'll be having this conversation this time next year. Now, I'm putting it out there, and I might be sounding a little bit terse, but I suppose I am terse, because unless you know where you're heading towards, where does all this work fit into? Guys, unfortunately, it appears where we started the problem. What is the problem we're trying to fix here? Because unless we know what the problem is trying to fix, a lot of the work we do although incredibly good work, so I am not decrying the work that's taking place, but unless we know that this is what we're trying to fix and this is the dial we're trying to move, how do we know where our focus is? How do we know where our priorities are? So I think there needs to be a conversation outside of here as to where we are, really where we are with this. Is this a data issue? Is it an ability to manipulate data issue? What is the issue we really are dealing with here? Not to be spun through in this particular conversation, but I would need some assurance that when we sit down next time and have this meeting, we're significantly closer to having something produced.
Jeff, if I may respond on that. So I think it's fair to say there's some confusion around what the product is that the committee is looking for. And again, I don't wish to sound defensive because I think we've provided a lot of data. We've provided different options as appendices. We've provided what we think the committee wants. And if we're not getting that right, happy to go away and look at that. But I would suggest there is an element of a lack of clarity from this committee around what it actually wants us to deliver in that space. So if I could just gently push that back, it would be really good to understand with clarity what is required here.
Then very happy to sit down outside of here and have that conversation. Definitely.
Yes, just sort of building on that, because I think the chair said a lot of the points I was sort of thinking about. For me, there was an awful lot of data, and I was kind of getting a little bit lost in trying to think where are the priorities, because so much has been happening, and for that, you know, complete congratulations. But the other side of that, in a way, was with the focus being on delivering so many events, and all of them really worthwhile and terrific. Is the priority of your work delivering the events rather than having the just, because you are a small team, just having that kind of breathing space to stand back and say, well, hang on, amongst all this activity, what do we need to focus on, and what is actually going to make the biggest difference? And kind of linked to that is that back again to being a small team, a lot of the issues are actually should be owned by the supervisors, by the managers, rather than by yourself and your team in a way. And I just wondered whether you were actually getting the real support, both from sort of managers and from the policing, the leadership in policing to deliver it. Because it is very easy for people to turn around and say, oh, it's the EDI team over there whose responsibility to it, rather than mine. So a bit of a ramble there, but I just wondered whether, you know, again, so much going on, whether you're getting the chance to just sort of think.
Okay. Any points as a response?
I'd probably just say thank you, Chair. So it will probably be useful for us to bring back next time an update on the overall strategy as a reminder, and then also the implementation plan, which I think is included but sits underneath that, because that you're absolutely right. I agree. I think it's a small team that punches well above its weight in terms of delivery, and what we have agreed with is in terms of the implementation actions on the strategy, it's really important to focus on what we want to achieve and not get lost around everything that we're trying to deliver. So I think if Chair, you're happy, we can bring an update on overall progress against strategy next time.
I would be happy to see that, but I would suggest that a conversation's had between then and now, where we can sit down and have a conversation so you're really comfortable to the point you're saying, what we're asking for, what does that look like? Because if I step back from it and say, as per the strategy, and please, if I'm misinterpreting the words, to be the most inclusive. So you then define, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we measure that particular piece to be the most inclusive police service in the country? that's quite a broad statement. And you sit underneath that and you go, what does that mean? Does that mean the amount of, make it up, the amount of senior females we have, the amount of people we have of colour at our senior levels inside? Is that one key measure of being an inclusive environment? Is that what we're looking at? What is it that looks like in terms of a measurement that we can go back and say to somebody, we have moved from A to B? And that's got to be clear for me.
Yeah, and that is our people EDI strategy. That is that document. That is the strategy we signed up to. And I think, Chair, if to your point, we can refresh that
down and work it out, and we can have my view is this is not a huge piece of work. And there may be gaps in terms of data and all of the good work that we do that I know that's happening in there, and it's fantastic. Please do not treat this as a critique. This is helping us all work together to get this to a slightly better place. We can sit down and look at that dashboard and go, absolutely spot on. We moved it from X to Y. And we all agree what that looks like, and we all agree all that hard work is moving that dial to meet that. So when somebody sits down and says to us, how do you measure your inclusivity? This is how we're measuring it.
Yeah, and I think we have all that, Chair. But if we're not presenting that in the right way, that's a useful conversation to have.
Let's sit down and have that conversation. Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions? I've got one more. There's the policing plan and the performance report for that, and the performance report for that. Now that's something we've dug into previously, and there was a conversation about a one-pager for that for this particular committee. Is that something you guys are aware of? A conversation that we should be having?
So, Chair, yeah, there are a couple of slides out of the main pack that will come to this committee. So we had our own strategic performance board yesterday.
Brilliant.
So for next committee, those relevant slides from that meeting will feed through into this. I think this one is just about timing, and it didn't quite line up.
Fantastic. All right. Any other questions? And I like these conversations, as uncomfortable as they sometimes feel, because I think if you look at this agenda that we've had previously, and where we've come from to where we are today, I would suggest we're in a significantly better place than we have been. Doesn't make the fact that we have improved that there is not more improvement to be had. So as we're ongoing conversation, so I can then answer the question, one, what are our three priorities? So I'm still struggling with that one. What are the three priorities? And Katie's looking at me with the eye rolling face. What are our three in a simple piece? Elevator pitch, what are the three priorities we are driving and all the work we're doing? And if we did nothing more, these are the three things that we will do. I took away all your funding.
And that's our strategy, Chair. And there's more than three. And I can't wait to show it to you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Town Clerk.
Yeah, item 6 is the professional standards conduct and vetting update for Q1.
Kyle, is that you? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So what members will note is that there's been an increase in both the numbers of complaints and conduct this quarter. In Q1 for complaints, we've seen 61 complaints, which is an increase from the previous quarter, and that equates to 93 allegations. Now, this is more than Q1 last year, and obviously Q4. However, you're seeing a steady increase in numbers of complaints. We're still below the national average. We have quarterly meetings with the IPC. I think those quarterly reports are forwarded on to members. So we're still below the national average per officer numbers. I've reviewed those complaints. There are no trends or linked issues to explain the increase. But what I would say is largely those complaints tend to be particularly around general level of service, around processes, for example, execution of warrants, damage to property or circumstances of arrest. What has been really helpful is actually the compliance of officers using body-worn video. So we're able to very quickly review those complaints and make a quick assessment around how best to resolve those complaints. And in the main, we can see that officers are carrying out duties diligently and professionally, and that avoids the need for going into formal conduct assessment. The three top areas are general level of service, police action following contact, and impolite language or tone. And the first two areas, they tend to be those process complaint areas. Out of the complaints, I think what is helpful is there was only one complaint where it was deemed that the service level was not acceptable. And for all complaints that require investigation, there is a right to appeal either to the local policing body or to the IPC. For conduct matters, there have been 22 conduct cases recorded in Q1. That does seem high. However, only 12, and I say only 12 because none are a good number, but only 12 resulted in a formal investigation with it, which is at the level of misconduct or gross misconduct. Now, part of the rationale for that spike is the team are recording everything that's sent to PSD for formal assessment. So the remaining 10 of those, it was either found there was no action required, or that there was an action for reflective practice, which is a structured learning and debrief with the officer concerned. What we have seen is an overlap in conduct cases at the lower end of reflective practice, which link into the complaint matters of general, impolite language or tone. We've had a number of instances where particularly high stress situations in terms of arrest or assault on officers, the communication style hasn't been as professional as it should have been. And some of that has navigated into the complaints area, as well as I mentioned, the reflective practice area. It was highlighted through our PSD working group. It's been fed into local policing through that for some cascade briefings, and also into our learning and development for our police personal safety training, who do a bespoke area around replicating high pressure situations. So that's a focus of our ongoing engagement work. But overall, despite that, the numbers of investigations across misconduct are fairly stable in volume. Vetting, we continue to make good progress across all areas, and operational delivery of the new APP, we continuing to embed and improve, and you'll see from the action plan we've moved the dial up from 69% of the recommendations completed up to 80% in this quarter. We are in a position where most of the remaining recommendations are systems-led issues. Some of these are national systems that just don't interface. So we're looking at manual workarounds to achieve compliance there with the same goal in mind. It's really important to mention to members, it is in the pack, but the HMIC, having completed appeal assessments, they have a separate one for PSD, which is a full integrity inspection, which is PSD focused. They're working through the country. They're currently with the Metropolitan Police, and that inspection is likely to take a number of weeks. We would expect notification of our inspection from January 2026 onwards. That'll be the earliest date. So as you would expect, we're linked in with the service improvement team to ensure that we're adequately prepared for that inspection. And then finally, just looking ahead, we've been heavily focused on our proactive work, particularly around standards. We had a listening circle, which was separate to the listening circles, which Kate has described, a PSD-led one, which particularly focused around barriers to reporting for women, particularly around misogyny. It links into the National Work of Violence Against Women and Girls portfolio. We've also refreshed our professionalism newsletter, which is released quarterly, which contains case studies and just reminders around standards of behaviour. Continuing with our inputs around standards and new joiners and leadership courses. And also it's mentioned in the paper, but we need to get a better understanding in terms of evaluating the impact of all the work that we're doing. We've spoken to the HMIC integrity team to look at some good practice and spoken to some other forces. So we're looking at how we can quality assure some of the training that we're delivering, get the right feedback, but also how do we understand that some of those messages are being understood. One example that I give you, it's just one example, is around scenario-based anonymous polling, in terms of a scenario that's given around, for example, feeling comfortable around reporting inappropriate behaviour, what would you do in the situation? We then assess the results. We look at what learning is required, send out that learning in a blended approach, and then we rerun a similar scenario a number of months later. And HMIC think that's a really good benchmark. So that's kind of the ambition in terms of where we need to get to, and probably quite quickly, so that work is in place. I'll just pause there for questions.
Apologies, can I just confirm that Joanna online is Joanna Abeyi?
Yeah, it's me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Town Clerk. I thank you for the report, and again, lots of very good work. I do like, and I know I'll bring some other people in, but I got quite excited as I listened to you with your scenario-based learning, and then understanding the gaps, and then going back to filling the gaps and working through. Those are very good assessment criteria that people, organisations outside of here use to understand where their capability or their knowledge or understanding gaps are. So I'd commend that. And if that's built into an ongoing strategy, fantastic, great work. I do like that. The listening circles, again, in terms of drawing information from those, again, I like those ideas. And if that's built into your strategy in terms of listening to your organisation, what are the challenges and how we fill in those gaps? Again, great measures around impact, because that tells me, you know what, we're understanding what's happening to a degree, and we're putting development in to bridge those gaps. Good work. And interestingly, I was stopped while I was at the recent conference with the man that looks up, or the individual that looks after where I live in Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Buckinghamshire, in terms of PSD, and was very interested to understand how we operate, how we work, and to take some learning from that. So he's offered me a visit to his local police station. Not sure if I'm going to be arrested or not, just to talk through what we do and how we do it and how we provide the scrutiny we do, because he was very happy to listen to our conversation and the work we do. So we are a bit of an example. So we'll continue to push and push hard to kind of produce things like this. Thank you very much for that, Carly. Any questions from the floor? Don't want to take this to Michael's show. I've got the chair. Do you mind if I take Deborah first? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Sometimes you look at complaints increasing, and actually that might not be a bad thing, because actually they're all classic speak, learning opportunities. So it's really, how concerned are you about the increases, and are they able, are you able to sort of learn from them, which I think you are doing. I'm also really pleased to see the improvements in vetting, because it was getting to be a bit of a broken record, the amount of time we were taking to get the vetting sorted out. And I do hope that colleagues in the ICVS are also benefiting from the increased speed in vetting. A specific question, this is perhaps just me not understanding, but on when there are no case to answer, I'm trying to get my brain round, if you have no case to answer, how come reflective practice is provided? Because if there isn't anything wrong, why do people need reflective practice? But that just might be me just not understanding that part. And a little, very small point of detail on Appendix 2 and its memberships of groups. There's no mention of any sort of Freemason lodges. And can I correctly assume that because they're not mentioned, that there aren't any members of Freemason lodges in the Chief Officer team?
A number of questions, and I would add, if I can just add to that piece around, my brain has disappeared into somewhere else. I'll come back to that point. It's an age thing, don't worry. If you can go to those points for me, please, Carly.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just to take just those 3 points. So yes, absolutely. You could say actually an increase is because people understand the complaints process better. They've got greater confidence. This is one viewpoint in the process, and of course there's been a lot of signal case and spotlight on professional standards, so people have a greater understanding in terms of the process and what they should expect from a professional interaction with the police. But one example, and it's not specific to a panorama, but you might say, you know, in custody, do people fully understand how to make a complaint? So one of the exercises that we have done is make sure, physically going down to make sure that the postering, the signpostering and the custody checklist is compliant and advertises how people can make complaints and they're up to date, because sometimes these are the things that get missed. So it's an ongoing reassurance that we are publicising and refreshing and encouraging people to make complaints when they should be. The no case to answer bit, really good point. It's a formal terminology that's used by Centurion, which is the PSD system, which means that there's no formal misconduct that's been found, but it might well be that actually it's appropriate for some learning. So that's why it might be no case to answer, but some learning there. And in terms of Appendix 2, I think that was raised by committee last year around the chief officer team. So we've had no declarations of Freemasonry. As members probably are aware, it's not a legal declaration to make. There is some discussion in the news at the moment between the Met and the Home Office around that, but at this time it is not a mandatory disclosure for police employees.
I think you'll find that there was a paper that came to this committee about 2 years ago, which said that the chief officer team would actually declare the sort of membership. So you might want to dust off that paper, because although it might not be mandatory, it was a policy that was agreed here, in my understanding anyway.
Before you answer, I can ask maybe the chair to comment.
It was discussed at length at the time, you're right, and there was a paper, and the chief officer's team agreed with our suggestions that they voluntarily declare, which we need to commend them for doing so, because I think that's probably one of the few, if not the only force leadership team that does that. However, having said that, and this is one of my questions, so if I may, Mr. Chair, you rightly referred to some of the media reports, and there is a very disturbing case of Met officers in a sexual assault accusations internally against female officers, and media are reporting Freemason links there of cover-up, which is concerning. The Met Commissioner, and it took me a little while to understand why you were saying this, but now I understand, because subsequently this came to light in the media reports, said that they were looking to hardening our policies on bringing membership of secret societies into the light. With that in mind, and I do get the point that it's not a legal requirement, am I correct that City of London Corporation employees are declaring their membership of Freemasonry internally with HR, but it's not public? If that is the case, that means also police staff will be covered. And I assume that HR and your team will be aware of where there are links to Freemasonry. And then the second is, well, if that is the case, can't we do that the same? There's not mandatory publicly yet, well, that debate might come, but that's could we do the same on a perhaps voluntary basis or another basis, and with police officers, so that they declare it internally to HR, and it's known to your teams? That's a step in the right direction. I would go for full disclosure, bearing in mind that the senior leadership team is already doing it, and indeed elected members of this body also declare it. So that's my question, specifically to kind of move it forward.
Thank you. And I think Paul's got a comment.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, Kylie, I'll just jump in there as it relates to chief officers, if that's okay. So I think Kylie was saying the same thing we're all saying. She was saying that we did agree as a chief officer team, and it's not just about Freemasons. We agreed to declare any membership of any organisations for transparency, and we do that still. So yeah, that absolutely is in place. I think the point Kylie was rightly making was that is a voluntary thing that we agreed, and actually there is no legal framework currently for requirements of that to happen. We did bring that paper where that was explored, I think, as you say, whenever it was, so many PABs, but a PAB previously. And I would suggest if we want to have that further conversation respectfully, maybe we get that paper out and review what was discussed there, so that we can have a look at that. I think from memory, Chair, I think you're right in terms of corporation staff. Richard's nodding, which is always a good sign. I think in terms of corporation staff, that is in place. I think the challenge for us is unless there is a regulatory change, there is no legal requirement for police officers certainly to make declarations of membership of any groups, or certainly in the Freemasons element, unless of course under our own policy it would mean that there was some element of a lack of integrity or advantage that they were seeking. So they would have a responsibility to declare that if through membership of a group that gave them an advantage that they wouldn't otherwise have. So there is a proactive responsibility on officers, but no legal framework for us to go and say, you all have to declare that. And I think we did talk about the voluntary element before in that paper, but again, not having read it recently. I think the challenge is when there's no requirement to do so, it becomes a bit of a toothless tiger, to be honest, because you can't actually take any action against anyone that doesn't. So it takes a lot of administration with no benefit, was I think the outcome, but happy to revisit the conversation if there's desire.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think it's good to have a look again at that paper, and Richard actually did kindly share it with me previously, and see if things have moved on or if we can in this. If not, could I perhaps consider, as chair of the Police Authority Board, to write to the Home Secretary to express our feeling that it would be good to resolve these matters. And I think actually, it should be public, but that's my personal view. But that I would mark that now as a possibility, and if members are not objecting, I feel that that is possible.
Jackie.
I'm going back to the training data. I just wondered if there was any corresponding data around the training and the number of particularly around the conduct matters in terms of social media use, behaviours of colleagues. And then I suppose to that point, just in terms again around the training, just wondering what the current training programme is around, and does it adequately cover things like social media and interaction between colleagues? So it's sort of like the sort of non-violent communication training and that kind of thing. Probably not one for now. It was just a speaking out loud question.
Thank you for that. And I think the point I went back before my senior moment jumped in was, I think that as a layperson to this particular area, not having a detailed understanding of policing, it links to the point that's made by Deborah. When somebody says that something happened and a person had to do reflective practice, and there's a point that we'll bring up in the non-public, it's very hard for a layperson to look at some of those activities and actions and to square off how did we get to that point. So whether that's an education thing for ourselves as a board, just so we can understand, when we see that, we can understand what was the gravity and why did that drive it to that point. Because as I said, there's one in non-public, we'll catch up with that shortly, where I found it kind of hard to understand how did that activity land us there. So if we can just make a note that we'll jump into that in non-public, so we can get a better understanding of when somebody says reflective practice, what do we really mean by that? And what's the red flag that takes us to another point? Because I'm struggling to understand. I think any layperson reading some of this would struggle to understand how do we get to that point. Yeah, comfortable with that? Yeah. Tice,
so there's one additional question, which is around the inspection reports, and you refer to the integrity inspection. Am I right that the previous effectiveness and vetting and counter corruption arrangements is going to be replaced by the integrity inspection, or just like?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's a new new wave of inspections.
Yeah. So first of all, good to see that on vetting it seems to be really moving in the right direction. So congratulations. And I know it's not easy just for practical reasons. So that's really good to see. I was thinking, if I'm correct, at the local policing committee, we see kind of a dashboard of the inspection recommendations, where it's moving, where you feel that in preparation, and I know you have reporting to the Organizational Improvement Board. It would be good to see for this committee where you feel we're moving, where you're changing the dial, where not. And perhaps based on the reporting to the Organizational Improvement Board rather than reinventing a whole different reporting mechanism, or similar to what we do at the local policing committee. That's okay. Cool. So just kind of get an idea of how confident are you where we're going to end up next year.
Can I just concur with that? That was the point I had. I really would like to see where we are on that trajectory. Where's our focus, so we can get the best outcome for the service. Paul,
absolutely, Chairs. And we've had our own internal review of where we are only last month, having carried on from after getting through the Peel inspection. So we have a readiness assessment of where we are. Carly, Sanjay and the team are working on that now to make sure we're where we want to be, because that was our internal one. And the plan is to bring that to this committee, such as we do for local policing, for all those other elements, but keeping that here. So probably next time is good if we can get that on the agenda.
That'd be great if you can.
If that could be an action, that would be helpful for us to jog memory.
Interesting point on that one. How much of that is going to be qualitative and how much of that is going to be quantitative in terms of your readiness assessment, just as a point?
Yeah, so it will be a mixture of both. I couldn't give you which way around percentages, but it will be a mixture of both. So good examples include whether we've put supervisory reviews on investigations, whether victims or potential victims have been updated. So there is some data in that. But then, of course, there's a qualitative element around how good were those reviews? What level of vetting are we delivering in line with the APP, which is the authorised professional practice. So we've framed the internal inspection, if you like, under the question sets that the HMIC will use for the inspection. And as you know from other inspections, it is very question focused, direct and codified. So we are trying to respond in that way. So guided by their inspection framework, really.
Fantastic. Looking forward to seeing it. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, one.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very new to this committee, so I'm on a very steep learning curve. But I did read the report and found it very thorough and very interesting. Just showing a little bit of naivety, a couple of questions, technical questions. First of all, it mentions about the Section 3 complaints and the non-Section 3 complaints. I wasn't quite sure what that actually meant. And the reference to the body cameras. I mean, is that compulsory for officers to wear them during their duties, or is that just something that they make their mind up whether they use those or not? Because it does seem to me that the body cam evidence seems to be fairly critical in some of the analysis of the complaints. And the third thing was the register of the group memberships. Who actually sees that at the moment? Is that public, or is it just really for groups like this that has access to that?
Three great questions, and three questions that would inform me regularly. So please, if you could help inform me and probably a few other members of the committee.
Yes, so Section 3 and the non-Section 3. So that's where that glossary, when it arrives, would be really helpful. Apologies, but in essence, the Schedule 3 complaints tend to be more complicated and require an investigation. So the non-Schedule 3 tend to be lower level complaints that might just be resolved around checking when somebody was last updated around their investigation, or reviewing some CCTV. So that's the differentiation between.
Can I just ask who determines whether it falls under Section 3 or not?
There is a assessment criteria that's set through the IPC. So as it comes into professional standards, our complaints manager will review that and assess whether or not it meets the criteria of a Section 3 complaint or a non-Section 3 complaint. The body worn video, and Jess, not to put you on the spot, but you might help fill some gaps. So I think almost all frontline officers, so particularly response officers, local policing officers, will have been issued body worn video. Now, I don't think it's mandatory because I don't think all officers have been issued with it, but most officers will make an assessment in terms of to turn the body worn video on if they're attending an incident, and that tends to be really, the take up tends to be particularly high because actually where they get into situations, it tends to resolve complaints a lot quicker. It's easier for statement writing. So I'm not sure, Jess, you want me to help out in terms of if it's been rolled out across all of local policing, but most officers have access to it.
Yeah, so I'm the superintendent for task force in local policing. So there are 2 superintendents in local policing. I oversee all of the specialist asset. However, I can confirm that every officer, they're not individually issued with a body worn video. There's a pool of body worn videos, and before their shift, I can pretty much say 99% of officers will go and they tap their warrant card. A body worn video is then issued to them. They take it out, put it on their body armor, and off they go. I can't remember when I last saw anybody in uniform without a body worn video on their body armor, because they realise that it protects them. As Kari has suggested as well, it does help to de-escalate situations when people realise they're being filmed, and it has really become part of their sort of daily usage now. And it's no, it's not mandatory, but I can't think of anybody that doesn't use it because the benefits far outweigh any negatives around it.
The register is a public still 9 or so the one that we have here about memberships of the senior team.
It's the last point, which is around the membership, isn't it? So it's obviously it's presented at this meeting. I'm not aware of it being in any other area, so it's public for the purpose of this meeting and the scrutiny here.
Thank you. And I just will also commend the senior officers and the officers with their transparency, because I think it's something that shows a level of trust and confidence in this committee, and it goes both ways. So, Paul, please.
Thank you, Chair. And it might be one we could discuss in close, but I feel like it's probably relevant. I would just raise the question, a philosophical one, if you like, with apologies, but should one of the chief officer team have declared a membership of a group, and there are a number of groups, but Freemasons is the one that gets talked about, what impact would that make? I'd just question, and what would we do with that information? I think it's just a bit of a philosophical point, because if I, for example, and I'm not, declared that I was in the Freemasons, what would we do with that information, and why would we want it? Because it's an interesting question just to ponder, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's a philosophical question. I know the chair would like a point, but I think it would be one that I would personally take into, as any sort of response, we would personally take into the non-public, because I've got a philosophical view on it as well. I think we all have, and I just think that may be a conversation that would expand beyond my abilities to control it. So,
Chair, can I just get a bit of guidance? I am a Freemason for transparency, so would you like me to withdraw from any of these conversations?
not at all, not at all.
That's the point, and this is the point. And I guess for us it's slightly easier because elected members, everything is published online and everything is declared. The thing about declaring that if there is a potential conflict of interest, then it is publicly declared, and you need to take the responsibility. So, like you say, for example, would you like me to step aside because we're discussing being Freemasons? I'm a Freemason. I don't think we should. I don't think it's needed, and it's open in the public domain. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that by publishing it online, you have everything out in the open, and then if there are cases, I mean, I know some of your memberships, there will never be a clash of anything you do at work that you might think, oh, I'm a member of this, so there might be a clash. So that it's just declared. But if, for example, I don't know, I'll take an example. If at some committee they would be discussing which laptops we're going to procure. I work for a company that procures that sells laptops, and some of them are here. I would, and I have done, step out of the meeting. Not that I'm involved with any of that, not that, but those kind of things. So it makes it easier. And I think with Freemasons, the point there being is that there is, rightly or wrongly, a perception that it could be, because it's secret, you could help each other and be favorable to your Freemason members. Now, I think the reality of that is probably moved on, perhaps, and that is the case in this case that went in the public domain, where there was a cover-up and there was this link of Freemasons. It's good to know. It's good to know that link. It's good to know for any investigations. I think for senior officers and for elected members, that should be in the public domain. I think for perhaps police officers, it doesn't need to be, but it's good to know for Kylie's team, and it's good to know for HR. And just in case, you can join the dots. That's why I think, I don't know, that's my philosophical answer on your philosophical question.
But I suppose it's the same for everybody around the table. I do some work for City Bridge, paid work for City Bridge. And if there was a conversation around City Bridge, I would have to accuse myself and walk out the conversation. But that's on whatever records that are required internally for it to be known about. So I think it's just a transparency piece. But I think it's probably either one for a glass of wine or one in non-public. So unless anybody's got any other questions on it, I'd probably close this off. Okay. Thank you.
Item 7 is the Q1 update on stop and search and use of force.
Thank you. Who's talking to this point for me, please?
Yes, Chair, that's myself, Superintendent Jess Wynne, and I am the stop and search lead for the City of London Police. So the report, which has been stated, is our Q1 oversight, which we've seen a general increase in stop and search across the organisation. Tends to be seasonal criminality within the Pulp area. Really, this Q1 includes May and June, which have been particularly hot as well, and that tends to interestingly increase criminality. But also we've seen an uptick in that period of bag and cycle thefts. And as I said, the warmer weather leading to more people in the city and more opportunity for those encounters to take place. The University of East London, that work continues. Actually thought that it had stopped and that we weren't going to get a report, because this has been, a bit like you mentioned earlier, Chair, one of those things that's constantly mentioned, we never see the result of it. It has been out of our hands because we are reliant on another organisation to provide us with that data. We have now had 2 versions of a report that they have come back to us with, and I actually had a meeting with the professor that was putting that report together last week. There had been some slight anomalies in terms of the data that they were processing to update their report and actually our data. And we've discussed that, and they understand where anomalies may lie. And there was also no reference to the national picture on stop and search, because I think there's no point in just looking internally. We need to look at how we compare nationally with other forces. So they have gone away to do a final iteration of that report, which I am very hopeful we will finally have at this committee for the Q2 update. So we are making progress. Okay. And we definitely will have a more thorough update at the next meeting. The number of complaints remains relatively low. The number of use of force complaints was at 4 for the quarter, and for stop and search was at 2. We also had our HMICFRS PL inspection result during the quarter. Mr. Betts, do you want to discuss? You have with me to go through that, or was something you want to? Yeah, okay. So we were given an indication, as I think we may have discussed previously in this committee, that perhaps we were looking at a requires improvement based on the situation on stop and search and use of force internally. So we did an awful lot of work to look at what we needed to do. I'm very pleased to say that we came out with an adequate. I know adequate sounds very adequate, but actually I think we're all very, very pleased with that, and that puts us in a very good stead now for the next inspection. There are only 2 areas for improvement which I've listed on the report, which we will be able to meet those 2 areas by the time of the next inspection, if not a lot sooner. And already the wheels are in motion to do that. So it put us, yeah, we were pleased. We were pleased with that result. So I'll just move on to the actual the tables that we produce for the committee. We start with the number. I said we had an increase. We did have an increase of 40 compared to Q4 of the previous year. So it took us up to 340. And again, I think I've explained probably some of the rationale for that. I won't go through every single row because a lot of it is self-explanatory, but just to go down to juveniles, because I think that was discussed at the last committee. What we can't do at the moment is we know if juveniles are stopped if they're aged between 10 and 17, because that's a juvenile. Without doing a manual trawl, we can't look at, well, how many of those were 10 years old, how many of those were 14 years old. But what I have put in there is an example of the dashboard that we use, which shows for juveniles between 10 and 17 years old in the quarter, which is the dates that can be seen at the top there. That gives you a bit more detail around the juveniles that were stopped and searched in the city during the period. We can work to see if we can get a little bit more granular on that detail in terms of ages, but that's, again, without doing a manual trawl. I know it's only 35 for the quarter, but we still have to find someone to do that, to extrapolate the information and present that information. And then I suppose a follow-on question is, well, what's the aim? Is it just out of interest, or is there anything specific that we're looking to gain from being able to go into that detail? Maybe we can come back to that. Black disproportionality, it's gone up very minutely to 2.4. Still puts us at top 3 in the country for that black disproportionality. Yes, it's still more than we want, but it's not a significant change considering the stop searches that have actually gone up by 40 on the last quarter. I think the next few there are relatively self-explanatory, but then I'll go down to use of force, and that is a significant increase, 13%, well, nearly 14% increase, up 126, and that is pretty much down to improved governance through internal training and making all officers aware of when they need to complete a use of force form. And for example, one we always use is compliant handcuffing, but that relates back to the HMIC report as well. And why are we compliant handcuffing? And looking for rationale around that, but that's something that we're working on. But as you can see, the completion rates for use of force form have increased from about 50% to 80%. So significant increase in the officers utilising force. We need to get that to 100 because every use of force, they need to be recording that use of force, but it's heading in the right direction. And then the final arrows there, again, nothing significant. We had no taser discharges. Use of taser has gone up by 5, a 27% increase, which is significant, but again, very much relating to the type of nighttime economy issues that we faced during the summer period. And then there was just at the final part of the report, just a suggestion. We do have this very good dashboard that we utilise internally, and there's an example there of what that looks like. We can maintain this way of reporting because that's obviously what the committee has asked for, but it might be useful for us to include some of the dashboard in that reporting for future reports, because it gives a very good visual oversight, and we can do compare quarters, etc., by using that.
I'll take a personal view. I like simple charts. I'm a simple individual.
So we remain as we are.
I like the simple charts.
You like the chart?
I like the simple charts.
Chair.
They give me a high level bit of detail. A high level bit of detail. It's going to be a high level detail. So nothing more. It gives me enough information. I suppose one of the questions I have, I'm not sure you've
yes.
is about the underreporting, and I think historically, the City London Police have not been great with data. data and data reporting has not been our strength. How can you assure us that, one, I suppose, is this a data issue? How do we ensure that the data issue doesn't come to bite us on the rear end again at some point in the future? Because that I'm going from a point of historically we've not been very good at it.
Okay, was any particular, when you say underreporting, was that for any specific part of this?
Well, as you've got here, closely increasing recorded use, are they confidence solely due to improved governance? Because you've improved it.
Yes.
Have we improved to the point where we're comfortable and confident this is absolutely spot on? This is where it needs to be.
No. And that's what we'll still be working on through the Stop and Search and Use of Force steering group, which I chair at the strategic level, and then the working group, which the Chief Inspector chairs. To what we're doing now is we've actually just put onto the dashboard, so we can actually now go into the grounds on the press of a button,
right, for
every single use of force, and also stop and search, and the rationale is really important for use of force. Is why is not using force?
Yeah.
What we haven't been able to do yet, but it's something that we aim to do. Again, it's just we can't make things happen overnight because there's competing priorities. But we're looking to, if handcuffing is used, and every time a use of force form could be done, we have now got a new role in place within the organisation called a Force Incident Manager, and that is an inspector embedded into our control room. That only started, I think it was 3 weeks ago now. He used to be a chief inspector who was a little bit more removed. We've now, and this is based on guidance from the College of Policing following the Manchester attacks a few years ago, around ensuring that we've got that insight and challenge for operational policing and across the organisation. So the Force Incident Manager will look at all the incidents of use of force on their shift and ensure that there's a rationale, and the rationale is the correct rationale for that particular use of force. But then we're also trying to ensure that the officer, when they're updating what's called Pronto, which is the front-loading intelligence system within the information system we use, they can't move on from the screen until they've put a rationale in. At the moment, they can just say compliant or non-compliant, and it pings off to the next page. We need to know the why.
Are we looking for incidents of bias? Are we looking for whether that's conscious or unconscious? Are we? What are the systemic issues? Potential.
Well, I think a lot of the time it's almost mechanical behaviour, I suppose. When you've got someone stopped, you put the handcuffs on them, which is actually quite a high use of force. You've already stopped somebody, you're already relieving them of their liberty, and then to put handcuffs on something, and particularly if it's compliant handcuffing, the question is, well, if the person was compliant, why did you have to put handcuffs on?
Which is a great point and a lovely point to see. My question is, are we looking for incidents of bias where that's concerned? Because that's what the public.
Well, yes, and we will relate that back to our disproportionality to ensure that are we putting handcuffs on, for example, young black men and not young white men?
Yeah. And
if that is the case, is there an unconscious bias there, or is there something more systemic that we need to concern about ourselves about, or is it one response group, for example, that might have a couple of officers that's causing this disparity?
Yeah.
And that's what we try to drill down to. But again, it's data, and at the moment we can't drill down into the particular individuals within the groups, and that's again something that we're trying to achieve this year.
Excellent. It's what the public would expect.
Yes.
Sanjay.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to add, in our aim to obviously ensure that we are utilising stop and search effectively and doing that governance, as Jess has referenced, we have the working group, we have the steering group, and part of those groups we have blended membership, including representatives from the training team. So Jess also talked about how we train our officers to use the force and understand some of the feedbacks that are coming back. We'll have professional standards on that group. So complaints coming in from the public as well are fed through, so that again we can look to adjust both the governance, the training, the information that's being communicated. So there's a real effort to make sure that it is a rounded and informed approach to improving how we do things. And when there is, as to Jess's point, the disproportionality identified, it is that kind of deeper look to understand why.
Why that
Exactly,
disproportionality?
and how can we work to address it? And I think that has, you know, been successful because we are in the top 3 in terms of disproportionality ratios for Black people. And I think that is something that we should
commend. Absolutely, but it doesn't stop us continuing to drill and dig and use the data to identify systemic potential systemic issues and why those systemic issues occur.
Yeah. And this is where evolving our understanding of the data, but having that scrutiny at all different levels, which is what Jess was outlining, will help us to understand what actually is driving some of that.
And links into the training that we do in terms of people understanding their own biases, why we're biased, why we're not biased, and looking across and doing read across that will allow us to look at data through different cuts and different lenses. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this slightly late and out of sync addresses hopefully some of Deborah's comments earlier on around, you know, EDI being seen to be just under the auspices of professionalism and trust team.
absolutely.
Actually, we make sure that there's representation across all of the relevant groups in the organisation, so it does become part of what we do and how we do it.
Part of our culture. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Jess. Any other questions? Deborah? No? Okay, thank you very much, Town Clerk.
Item 8 is questions and matters relating to the work of the committee.
Any questions? Town Clerk?
Item 9 is any other business that the chair considers urgent.
I have no other business.
Okay, so item 10 is the move to exclude the public. The members can exclude the public.
Content? Yeah. Okay.
If you'll bear with us, we'll let the live stream to end.